science. I am going to be covering computing science from early level up to second level across our ELC and primary curriculum. It's a pretty much jam-packed whistle-stop tour of computing science, where I'll start with why I teach computing science, what it looks like across our curriculum. I will touch on what I mean, or what we mean by computational thinking, what we mean by coding and programming and what that looks like. And then I will introduce you to a whole pile of resources. And I do have that we have a practitioner examples here. So the lovely Kay will also be able to demonstrate how she's been using it in primary 1, which is just wonderful. And I know you're going to have some really, really great ideas to share with us. So what I'll probably do, Kay, is after my computational thinking part and some of the resources there, I'll stop and pass over to you. So let's get started with the why. So I always like to do a little bit of, setting the scene of computing science technology in the world around us. And I always start with this first question. And I really want this to be a collaborative and as interactive as it possibly can, because at the end of a Tuesday, for me, it feels like it's Friday already, but I would love for you just to stick in the chat. So do more people own a toothbrush or a mobile phone? What do you reckon? And this is always a good question to ask your kids as well. And it just sets the scene of, the importance of computing science. Any takers? Sadly, you're correct. A mobile phone. 5.1 billion people own a mobile phone and only 4.2 people own a toothbrush. Gosh, you could have such great debates in your class about that as to why that is. So it was the Mobile Marketing Association of Asia who made the claim. And since they made that claim, people have tried to debunk that statement, but sadly, it is true. Yeah, it is pretty sad, but I just think a really, really nice starter to when you're speaking to particularly older kids about computing science and speaking about what it looks like in the world around us and just setting that context. This is a really nice stat as well. Your smartphone is millions of times more powerful than NASA than they used to go to space in 1969. Again, the rich discussions you could get out of that, linking that to your space topic, and actually looking at the size of a mobile phone compared to a space rocket. So absolutely superb little stat there. Also, Google processes 2 trillion searches per year. Goodness me. And the searches, when you dig down deep into that, what people are searching for, how often people are searching for things, I've got to say that's one of the bits of tech that I probably couldn't live without. And it's kind of crazy because whenever I probably don't even ask people to answer questions for me anymore, I just Google it. It's probably quite shameful, but it's just the easiest thing for me to do. And that's the world our kids are growing up in. Anybody else out there just Google all the time whenever they've got a question unanswered? Feel free to pop a wee thumbs up in the text box. Mashable. Anyone ever used Mashable, I wonder, out there? It was a website I used to use quite a lot. Oh yes, sorry Pam, or Alexa. Oh my goodness, where would I be without Alexa? And I'm quite glad Alexa's in the other room, so she's not going to go off just now. Mashable, world's most profitable blog. And it was created by a 19-year-old here in Scotland, living with his mum and dad. And that's really important as well, because it brings that context of computing sciences for everyone. And it's, for people here. It's not just for those people in America who are, working in Facebook or Google, etc. It's people here working at home, developing that computing science, developing the technology and solving all those world problems. And he's estimated a 2 million. I mean, that's quite nice. And I used to say to my kids whenever I was doing computing science with them in class, if anyone goes on to make their millions, remember, I would really like a Porsche or a Ferrari. None of them have come back to me yet. So we've kind of set the scene, given you some of those sort of like fun problems that's happening in the world around us. But what kind of technology should we be ready for in 2021? Artificial intelligence, Pam, you said about Alexa, that's artificial intelligence. We use artificial intelligence probably more than we even realize we're using it. Can anyone else pop in the wee chat facility here what artificial intelligence they might use on a regular basis? I wonder if there's anyone out there that could give me some examples, apart from Alexa. Sat nav. Yep. I also think the artificial intelligence in Amazon, you know, that way where you've looked for this might also interest you, and it starts to build a picture of you. And Google does that as well with your searches, and it starts to build that picture of your likes. I also get quite scared sometimes with Facebook because I might have been talking about something. So for example, I was talking about getting new stairs fitted in my house, and I wanted to modernize my house up. And I went on Facebook, and lo and behold, there was an advert for like new glass staircases. And I thought that was quite scary, although I have been told that it seemingly isn't listening to you, but I'm not 100% sure I believe that. But having those ethical conversations with children as well, really, really interesting. Robotics, oh my world, the world of robotics and what's happening across the world in robotics is absolutely phenomenal. And boom, there's another brilliant project you could be doing in nursery and in primary, talking about robots, taking those B-bots apart, looking inside them and figuring out how they work, and you know, talking about all the different parts. Vehicle automation, ooh, yikes. 5G and enhanced connectivity, extended reality. Anyone ever heard about extended reality? That could be your homework perhaps for today. Virtual and augmented reality, which as you know is massive, and cyber resilience, you know, tops all of this. I do kind of try to get cyber resilience into pretty much every session that I'm delivering, because how cyber resilient are we? How resilient are we to be able to bounce back from you know, someone hacking into our accounts? How often are we looking at our passwords to make sure we are using that 3-word password rule? So how resilient are we? And that's a hugely important part of computing science as well. Okay, so why teach computing science? Like, I would say it's like dead obvious, but you know, computing science is in the world all around us. And you know, whenever I'm delivering computing science to kids, predominantly in primary school from primary 1 upwards, we do start with talking about the technology, going to the shops, those automated doors, talking about the sensors, talking about how, you know, it's not magic how this happens. There are sensors, there's people that have created, solved problems, built this, written code for it. They've worked together and they've developed these sensors that sense someone coming, and then that triggers a piece of code to say, now open the doors, and the doors open automatically for you and then close again. And again, bar scanners and how they read code, how they translate that code. And again, just so much rich conversations around that, just from, for example, going to the shops. The traffic lights and the sequence of being able to, well, particularly if you're working at 2nd level, you can actually then begin to code and program your own set of traffic lights. And I have to say, the code for writing that is much harder than you think it would be, and creating that sequence. But the problem solving involved in that is phenomenal. But again, with younger kids, talking about those traffic lights is not just magic. And many traffic lights have also got sensors on them. So having those conversations with kids to look at the environment around them, come in the next day, come in the next week, and tell me about all the computing science that you experienced. And also, you know, as I said, automated cars, what is happening now? And just doing a little bit of research around that is so fascinating and so exciting. And guess what? We've not even touched a computer yet, but I've probably built an entire topic for an entire term just from understanding technology and computing science in the world around us. And what's really, really nice is to then look at, well, what is it going to look like in 10 years' time? Will we have flying cars, perhaps? Who knows? Will we have baseball boots that self-lace? Who knows? And also, finally, do you know any famous computing scientists? A great topic, particularly linking that to some of our famous female computing scientists, such as Grace Hopper, our first ever computer programmer. So you could do so much research and so much engagement just about computing science in the world around us. Any questions so far coming through? So usually I would play a video at this point, but I'm going to miss that video out, and I will pop a link to the video in the chat at the end of this session. And it's from Skills Development Scotland, and it's a really good video. You know, it's got drums in the background, and it's just looking at technology and computing science around us. And it's speaking about, you know, who's actually going to develop this computing science? Well, it's the kids that are sitting in front of you in your class every single day. It's the kids that are sitting in your nursery settings every single day. It's those kids who are problem solving and building and engineering and creating, working together collaboratively every single day. These are our computer scientists. And really, you know, that you have the exciting job to be able to nurture and support that enthusiasm for computing science. But particularly, if there's also one other point that you're going to take away from this session, is that computing science is for everyone. It's not just for boys. And I'll speak a little bit more particularly around computational thinking. But we have a real problem in the technologies industry, not just Scotland-wide, but globally. We just don't have enough girls. It appears that, you know, it's just not an area for them. It could feel quite geeky. It could feel like, you know, it's boys' world. It's just about coding and programming. And it's absolutely very, very, very far from that kind of world. Oh, I've also, as you can see, I've got a giant QR code. So if any of you have got your phones, you want to scan that code, it'll take you straight to the video as well. So for those of you who may have come from an ELC setting, who were at my session on Monday, I did touch on the global context of what the skills look like, and what those top 10 job skills for the future look like. And again, I stress it's never too early to talk about this with kids, to talk about and nurture those skills. So some top stats again, because I do like some stats. By 2025, 85 million jobs will be displaced by a shift in the division of labour between humans and machines. But what we have to remember about that shift is that machines don't make themselves. People make those machines, people program those machines, people design those machines and create those machines. 50% of all employees will need reskilling by 2025 as adoption of technology increases. And during lockdown, we all upskilled tremendously with our digital knowledge and digital skills. So we can only imagine what the upskilling will continue to look like as devices change, as software changes, and as technology continually evolves. Creativity, critical thinking, and problem solving top the list of skills employers believe will grow in prominence in the next 5 years. And in fact, it's what employers are currently looking for at the moment. They're looking for people who can look at problems, break those problems down into more manageable parts, extract the most important parts from those problems, and get it solved quickly. And that is what people are needing now. And one thing I noticed at the beginning of lockdown were just the amount of kids who, when they were, you know, in lockdown, well, what do I learn? You know, my teacher's giving me all the stuff, where do I start? And it was that lack of independence and self-regulation that was so evident, you know, probably more so at the beginning of the first lockdown than the second, because so many children did really develop those independent and self-regulated skills and knowledge. And again, that is what we nurture so greatly in our ELC and our primary settings, and to really build on that independence for learning. Again, these are just some statistics from Scotland. I want to focus particularly on the average salary. It's really, really important. You know, I'm speaking to you guys as practitioners. You're probably already sold on this. You get that why computing science is so important. But what's really important for you all is to bring your communities with you, to bring your families on this journey with you, to make them aware of this learning that's going on in computing science and why it's so important, why it's so important to the economy, developing our young workforce. And it's that average salary of 37,500, which I think is actually increased now. Which is a really good statistic to share with your communities as well. And again, those absolutely dreadful statistics for females in the sector, it has actually increased to 24%. Oh, wow. But we really need to do a lot more. And again, that's our job as primary practitioners, as ELC practitioners as well, to say, this world is for everybody. And what does that look like for us? Okay, again, still on the why, that's what the job market looks like, and I'm just going to whiz past that. Okay, so computing science is, and you could tell by my enthusiasm, I have seen kids who have been disengaged from learning, and it's not just a light bulb, it's a thunderbolt moment where kids just get it. They love computing science because it's part of the world that they live in, and they want to create it and develop it. And what's really important about computing science is that it's not about consuming the technology. It's not about sitting just watching Minecraft on a screen in front of you. It's about developing and creating and understanding how that technology works. So it's not about being a passive user of the technology. It's engaging with the technology and just not thinking it's magic. And I was terrible when I first started teaching. I used to say to the kids, it's just magic that works. No, it's not. And that was terrible of me to say that, because I might not know how it works, but let's investigate that together. Or, if a new piece of technology was sent to my class, or given microscopes or whatever, I would give it to my kids. Groups of kids go off, solve that, tell us, come back and demonstrate to the class how you use it. And that was a really, really rich learning, because we're busy teachers and we can't do everything at once. Okay, just putting it into context within our curriculum, particularly focusing on 3.3, increasing creativity and employability. Throughout how good is our schools, digital skills, digital literacy, computing science is peppered throughout that document. I'm also aware that I don't want to spend too much time on this why, because I've got a whole ton of resources to share with you. So computing science, what does it look like in our curriculum? So we have these three organisers: computational thinking, understanding and analysing how computing technology works and analysing that in the world around us, and then the designing, building and testing computing solutions. So that's the coding and the programming side of things. One thing I will also stress about computing science is that we never ever teach it in isolation. And I think that's why we're so successful with computing science in the nursery and primary sector, is because we would never teach anything in isolation. It's always as a cross-curricular, interdisciplinary learning. And all the resources I'm going to be showing you in this session will actually show you how you can deliver a literacy lesson, a maths and numeracy lesson, social subjects, etc., all based around computing science, which is absolutely wonderful. But it's also ensuring that all learners are engaged in computing science, and it's not only if you're interested in that one part of computing science. So yes, please do remember that and take that away from this session today. So let's get on to the juicy fun stuff. Computational thinking. Has anyone heard of computational thinking? Pop your thumbs up, pop something into the chat facility. Tell us if you've ever heard of computational thinking before. No takers. Just me then. So I've been working in computing science and working in Education Scotland now for the past 5 years. And I must admit, since I have been heavily focused, particularly in the area of computational thinking, it has kind of consumed my life and my world, because computational thinking is the golden thread that runs throughout our curriculum. and you will begin to see it everywhere in the world around you. So it's about learning to solve problems with or without a computer. Developing computational thinking is central to our curriculum in ELC, primary and beyond, but it can also be applied across everyday life and indeed in all other subject areas, math, science, literacy, and even PE, as I mentioned. So computational thinking is a process of understanding and solving problems. It's a systematic process that encourages us to break a problem into smaller parts, identifying the key elements and discarding the elements that are not required, and then building a solution in a logical, ordered way. So it makes it very similar to mathematical thinking. And indeed, there's a great deal of research out there linking the benefits of using the two together. So there are many opportunities to embed these concepts and approaches into your curriculum, especially, as I said, across numeracy and mathematics. So instead of learners trying to work out a route in a textbook, they can be using a programmable B-bot to follow a path, trying to solve problems on code.org, using directional language, or testing a range of skills and strategies using a wonderful website called Baybras, which I'll show you later. Any questions about computational thinking? Okie doke. So I'm going to start with my first resource, and that is Barefoot. Barefoot is my absolutely, if you're starting with computing science, this is what you start with. You go straight to Barefoot. It has resources linked to every area of our curriculum. It is aligned to Curriculum for Excellence. They have a vast array of resources that you can download from their website. There are posters, but it's the learning and teaching materials that are absolutely phenomenal within Barefoot. Now, Barefoot has now been taken over from BCS, the Chartered Institute for IT, and we are working alongside them to continue to develop these resources. We have just aligned new resources in Barefoot to the seasons for our ELC settings for early level and first level. So I would absolutely highly recommend that you spend some time looking through Barefoot. So they have a great computational thinking poster. They've got various posters for computational thinking, depending on the age and stage and level you're working with. But again, breaks that down into concepts and approaches. So predicting and analysing, making judgments, creating algorithms. And again, a lot of this terminology will be completely brand new to you guys, but please don't be scared of the terminology. I remember when we updated and revised and refreshed the experiences and outcomes, and there was quite an outcry about the word algorithm appearing in the experiences and outcomes. But all of the kids I've worked with just love learning this new terminology, and they love using, algorithms and, decomposition, abstraction, and, I'm just tinkering, I'm creating this, and debugging was the one that they loved the best, looking for those problems and fixing the problems. And that doesn't have to be on a computer. This is unplugged. This is computational thinking. And it's something that we are doing every single day on a daily basis. So I would absolutely recommend that you have a wee look at Barefoot. This is one of the resources that we have in Barefoot, and it's focusing on abstraction. So we have 4 animals here, and I really want you all to engage in this and see if you could guess. So when we're talking about abstraction, we're taking a problem, we are breaking it down, and we're extracting the most important parts of that problem. So, for example, I have, we're going to work in pairs. So you could do this with your class, you could do this with your colleagues, you can do this in groups of 4s. I'm going to think of an animal, and I'm going to describe that animal to you. And I would like for you guys to be able to tell me exactly which animal I'm describing. And I would like to see who gets that first. So I have 2 ears. My ears are long and floppy. I have a little tail that's fluffy. I have Pam McDowell. Almost. I have 4 legs and my body is covered in soft fur. Let's see if anybody else. Oh, well done. A rabbit. I'm so glad that is a bunny. Yay! I was so hoping someone managed to get that. So again, what we're doing here is, well, what elements of the bunny is the most important? What are the most important parts of a bunny? I probably should have started with maybe the soft, fluffy tail, rather than the big ears, because you're absolutely correct, Pam. You thought of elephant. So again, it's looking at those different animals, or you could use this anywhere, but there is a whole area of learning around that, looking at abstraction, identifying what's important and leaving out the details that you don't need. So simplifying things, and how that links to mathematics and how that links to literacy as well. And in Barefoot, that's exactly what it does for you. And as busy teachers, that's exactly what we need in our life, really good, rich resources that we can pick up and use with our kids. This is a really, really nice activity as well. So when we're talking about, creating algorithms, a precise set of instructions or rules to achieve an outcome and solve a problem. In this example on Code IT, they're looking at writing instructions for a robot or an alien, someone who requires these instructions, who's never made a jam sandwich before. So they need to create a precise set of instructions and algorithm that they could give to this robot, and this robot will be able to create a jam sandwich. And it's a really phenomenal activity to do with your kids, because, you've got to make sure you get the precise steps. You've got to take the bread out of the bag, for example. You've got to then pick up the knife. You then have to put the knife in the butter. You then have to spread the butter on the bread. So you can begin to see how that algorithm is beginning to take shape. And algorithms are wonderful to do with your kids, all the way from nursery, all the way through to primary. And there's some brilliant videos on Code IT that shows you other teachers who have been involved in that, and how, it could be quite messy with the jam and the butter, shall I say. Algorithms are in the world all around us, and here are some really nice ideas to incorporate algorithms. I said, just creating recipes, following an algorithm, hand washing, for example. I'm sure you all have algorithms littered around your school on how to wash your hands properly, and making sure. And what's also really nice about some of these algorithms is, after you've created an algorithm, cut that algorithm up and then get the kids to actually place that algorithm in the correct order as well. Planting seeds, that's an algorithm. You need to know a step-by-step of instructions, an algorithm for multiplying by 10. Making a cake, spelling rules, and storyboarding. That's probably my favorite algorithm ever, is, storyboarding, sequencing, looking at what comes first, what comes in the middle, and what comes at the end. So there's lots and lots of ideas and examples that you could share from, and that, again, that's another great example from Barefoot. So before I pass over to Kay, I've just got a few more resources here for computational thinking that I'm going to share with you. We've got brilliant computational thinking resources on BBC Bitesize. I'm going to share this presentation with Pam because I've got all the resources there. But again, the QR codes are on the page there, so you can just scan it and you can, use that with your kids. So BayBrass is a superb resource, and I'm just wondering if I can just escape here, and I'm going to show you. So BayBrass is a really, really nice challenge. There's going to be a global competition that takes place in November, and it would be phenomenal if some of our schools across Scotland can take part in that. If you can't take part in that competition in November, and the dates are the 18th and the 19th of November, there are also past competitions that you can get involved in. And they're just really, really nice, some of the sessions. Oh, that's handy, isn't it? Denied. Let me just go in. Oh no. This is what happens when you're unprepared. I always start at the very beginning with the kits just so I don't embarrass myself. So, and this is really nice, you know, you could do these activities as a whole class. You can do this with groups of kids. You can just leave the kids to work on this together. So one of these animals have made that footprint. Which one is it? I wonder if anyone can type into the message box, which animal has made these footprints? Pam, you're obsessed with elephants. You're correct, it is the rabbit, so let's select the rabbit. Click on save. Phew, I'm correct. And let's go on to the next one. Okay, so we've got train tracks here. I need to get the train to the house and I need to put the correct tracks there. So again, computational thinking, that problem solving. Okay, so I need the train to go around there. So I need a track that's going to turn around. So I think that's the track I'm going to use there, and then I'm going to use a straightforward track. And sometimes this is really nice as well, because when we're using B-bots in the class for programming our B-bots, or also just being human B-bots, getting from one point to another point, how do we move our bodies? Where do we have to go? How many steps do we need to take? And this is really good for, you know, standing up, visualizing, I'm the train, I need to get to here, so I need to turn right, or I need to turn that way. Where does that train track take me? So there we go, I was correct again. And there's lots of these wonderful challenges, and they, you know, the challenges are in Baybrass, not challenges I've ever really come across before. There's lots of new ideas in there, and they're really exciting and really engaging and very, very simple. But yeah, I would 100% tell you to have a look at some of these. One last, here we go. Also another really good website, CS Unplugged. A wide range of resources for primary education. Again, looking at problem solving. When we talk about unplugged learning, we're talking about, you know, moving away from the computer and everything we've been speaking about there. We have spent half an hour talking about computing science, and, you know, not once have I actually said that we need any of the technology or coding or programming at all. So what I'm now going to do is I'm going to hand over to Kay, who's going to speak about, you know, how she's developing computing science across her school, and particularly in primary one.
Hello. So I'm just really going to talk about things that I have done in class. So it's primary one that I'm in just now. And sorry, Louise, if I'll talk about some things that you've already mentioned as well. But one of the first things I do is just talk to the children about, like, what is a computer? And obviously they talk about the actual computer, desktop and laptops, and then it's getting them to think, but what else is like a computer? So then they start talking about things that have plugs, and they go around looking for things that are plugged in, like the walkie-talkies, and it's getting them to have a kind of bigger look at things like the automatic doors that we have in the school. So why is it that the door opens? It's because that there's somebody standing there, or things like cash machines, just things that they will be aware of that they've maybe used before, but have never thought about it as a computer. Another way I like to introduce it is there's a book called Hello Ruby, A Journey Inside the Computer. So it's just like a nice introduction into computers. You can buy the book, or there is a YouTube. It's an American teacher, so if you can get over the American accent, you can just type it into YouTube and watch it with your children. And again, it just is like an introduction into coding. It gets children to think about computers and, you know, how computers work and all that kind of thing. So you can have a look at that on YouTube if you're interested. We are doing play-based learning in school. So we have things like tinker tables. So it could be an old telephone, which they all love. It's great for numbers as well, number recognition. But they don't really tend to have phones anymore, it's mobiles. So just an old phone or an old keyboard that's not plugged in, just things. It might be a role play. We sometimes have like a school role play, and they love being the office lady, writing notes, whatever else. And it's just getting them to take apart old devices and just tinker with them. And again, it was a bit like what Louise says, it's getting them to actually see what's inside these devices, how are they made up. It's a good introduction to batteries as well. A lot of the time that's when they discover that a lot of things use batteries. Sorry, I'm just reading my notes, what else have I put down? Tablets. We use a lot of the apps like Markup. So I've got a picture here, and this is actually last year's, because we don't have our iPads just now, but we'll get them back soon. But there's on the photo app on an iPad, you can take a picture and then use something called Markup. So when we were doing shapes, I'll just show you the picture. The child had taken a picture. They were to go around and find shapes in the classroom. So she'd found a clock, and then if you see, she's actually circled it. She chose pink and circled round the picture to show that the clock was a circle. So just things like that. We've done things before. It was like an I Spy, where I set things up in the classroom, a wall display, and I took a picture, and then I gave the child the iPad and said circle all the things that begin with things like that. So you can use them throughout the whole curriculum. And another app that they quite like to use is Pics, where they can draw a picture or take a picture of a character out of a book, and then they just draw a line over the mouth, and then they talk, and the picture moves its lips. Things like that. Again, we've used that for topics. We've used it for literacy. You know, the children at this moment in time are really just using line drawings just now until they learn all their alphabet. So we would get the children to maybe take a picture of their line drawing and then animate it. And also using computers in class is something that we try to start from early on. So there's quite a lot of things to start with that help the children's mouse skills. So ABC Yeah is a great resource for mouse skills. You just Google ABC Yeah mouse skills, and it comes up with loads and loads of games. Or another one that we like to use is Autodraw.com, and it is basically just like the paint function that you would use on a computer, but anyway, it's online, and again, it's just good to get the children used to using a mouse. And also things like Keyboard Climber, just to get the children used to actually finding the letters and symbols and things on the computer keyboard. Just going back to computational thinking, we have got these caterpillars. They're just Fisher Price. They're relatively cheap. I think they're maybe £25, and they come with, it's like a USB adapter, and they just literally slot in, and on them they've got directions. So even at a very basic stage, before the children even think about directional language or whatever, it's just getting them to experiment. So they just plug the body parts on, press play, and then watch the caterpillar, the caterpillar, go around the floor. And then once they're used to that, then we kind of get them to actually think about the structure of the code that they're putting in. So to get the caterpillar from one point to another, what would you need? What direction would you need? Okay, you want to go forward, and then where's it going left? Okay, which body section is left? So we start off with these, and then so when I spoke about this last year, I didn't actually teach the children how to use, this is just a wee robot mouse, or if you have B-bots, they do the same thing. I had only let the children use the caterpillar, and then I just gave them the mouse out, and really it was just play with it and see how you get on. And from that, the children themselves, without me doing any direct teaching, were talking about directional language, like it goes forward, you want to go forward, put it back, no, turn it round. And then from there, that's when we started the discussion with the children about the actual language that they're using, and what it was to link up the word forward, back, left and right to the actual symbol. So when I did this, again, it was with shape. So I had like a shape mat, and they had to go from one shape to another. So go from the circle to the square. But since then, we've used it for like number maths or letter maths. And again, it's just adding it in where you can into your learning, like whatever subject you're teaching. And as time goes on, they begin to understand the relationship between the symbol and the direction. And also it's quite good for prediction. So if I put in the code and I say, right, okay, I'm going to do, starting at this square, I'm going forward, right, where will it end up? And just, you know, adding in a bit of prediction as well. I think that's me. If there's anything else anybody wants to ask, I'm happy to answer questions. But that's just basically, it's just an introduction. It's just things that I do. I try and put in daily, and honestly, you'd be surprised at how quickly the children pick up the directional language and what the actual symbols mean. And you know, you can use it in so many different ways. But it's just a wee introduction and a dip in, shall I say, into what we're doing. I don't know if you're going to bring this up, Louise, as well, but the what digital learning might look like document is fantastic. It's set out into early first and second level, but I've got so many ideas from that document as well, so it's definitely worth a look.
Oh, fabulous. Thank you, Kay. Yay. I'll give you a round of applause, as I
Thank
always
you so
say
much.
with my class.
Do you know, sorry, just one thing that I thought about there that I didn't write down, but it came to my head when you were talking, is the immersive reader function on Word as well. We use that quite a lot for 1+2 languages. So we do French. So I know you can use it for different things. You can use it for grammar lessons and all these kind of things. But in my class specifically, we use it for French. So you can type something in English, it will change it into French. But when the French writing is on the board, the children can go up and tap it. So if it was something like a colour and it said rouge, and the children don't know, they can go up and tap the word and it will come up with a red blob. So things like that as well are good to use.
Fabulous. Thank you very much, Kay. Well done.
You could definitely see the links there with, you know, particularly there at early level between digital literacy and computing science, you know, with your immersive reader, and then also how you've been using the technology and also using that unplugged technology as well, and that directional language. And thanks so much for mentioning what the digital learning may look like, because I've popped that link in there to the chat. So, Kay, thank you so much. And there's P. Burns saying thank you and great ideas. So that's absolutely brilliant. And basically what I'm going to be doing next is moving on, Kay, to exactly what you were just saying. Let me just share my screen. Sorry, I'm so used to Teams, it's terrible, isn't it? Because I'm now going to be moving on to the more coding and programming elements of computing science, and, you know, being able to use programmable devices or equivalent, and that's exactly what Kay was speaking about. You know, it doesn't always have to be particularly at early level that you're using Bee-Bot or all of these programmable toys that you have, but it's also about, you know, being a human robot, a human Bee-Bot, or whatever. You know, there's a whole range of resources out there. And then moving on to being able to, you know, solve basic problems, building simple programs to carry out tasks. And then when we progress to second level, it is actually being able to use more of that block-based coding language. So again, I wanted to start with Barefoot because they have produced this amazing poster linking computational thinking with programming, and how without all of that computational thinking knowledge, you can't possibly program and code. So again, this is another free poster that sits on the Barefoot website. So looking at examples on how computational thinking is used throughout the programming processes as we design, code, and debug. The examples given aren't the only way we use computational thinking as we program, but perhaps we can think of further examples that we can use with our pupils perhaps, and that's something that you can maybe go away and have a look at and think with your kids. Poster also contains a really good debugging challenge to develop your logical reasoning skills. So again, just within one poster, you've got another learning experience with your kids. One of my tip-top favourite ever block-based coding programs, and this is Scratch. If you've never ever seen Scratch, you've never lived. I love Scratch. I adore block-based coding. You can also use Scratch. Pam, is it Scratch Junior? It is Scratch Junior, isn't it, Pam? I think.
It is, yes.
It is.
Junior, yes.
And if you've got iPads, or you're getting iPads, sorry, Pam, I'm not sure what devices and resources you've got in your schools.
The iPads are on their way back with MDM on them.
Oh, awesome. Well, you might also, do you have Scratch Junior on the iPads?
Yes.
Excellent. So that's on your iPad. It's again, a really, really wonderful resource. And I'm just going to, I've got it up here. For those people who are just completely new to Scratch and you're maybe looking at this going, oh my goodness, where do I start? This is your cat Scratch. You can change him. You can give him he's a sprite. You can give him lots of costumes. You can change it. You can add sound. You can make him do a whole bunch of things. You can create stories in Scratch. You can create music in Scratch. You can do whatever you want. You can build a game, create a game activity. You can do whatever you want in Scratch. It's a phenomenal tool, but this is the bit that you need. So even if you've, tinkered around with Scratch, there's a whole bunch of resources here to really help you get started. You can animate your name, you can create characters, you can create games, as I've said, you can create a story. This was probably the way I introduced Scratch to my upper first and second level learners. Was through the creation of a story and bringing their stories to life, because again, some of my more disengaged learners, this was absolutely my inward route to get them engaged with literacy and computing science. So there's a whole bunch of tutorials there for you, again, linking to areas of the curriculum. Also within Scratch, you've got tutorial cards, and what I used to do, I'm a primary teacher, I printed them out, I laminated them, I popped them next to the computers in my class, and kids were able to take the activities out of the cards, and they can, test and trial some of the code. They could, what's going to happen. And that's the whole, purpose of playing with Scratch. It is about playing with it. It is about tinkering. It's about making mistakes. It's about problem solving. I want this to happen. So what do I need to do? What kind of block-based coding do I need in this or that section? So there's just so much learning within Scratch. It's a pretty phenomenal tool and resource. Whoa, which goes on to my other literally phenomenal resource. If you're looking for a contemporary resource, you are not going to get anything more contemporary than code.org. So again, I'm sure I've got it here. Hour of Code is obviously linked to code.org. It is code.org. It is the biggest global computing science, range of activities. They have an Hour of Code week where the world stops, every educational establishment, I would love to think, stops across the world and just does their Hour of Code. I've done lots of different Hour of Codes. As I said, the resources there are just phenomenal. You can look at pre-readers, and there's a bunch of, again, contemporary, brilliant resources. Codables always seem to go down well with my kids. Again, it's an American website, but we are hopefully going to be working with code.org, and we would love to see this link to Curriculum for Excellence. So as you can see, they also have links to Scratch in there. So there's resources there, but you see the Minecraft resources, they are brilliant. Anyone here used Hour of Code in any of the resources on here? Or is this completely brand new to folk? And they've also got resources from Raspberry Pi, Star Wars. It is a flippin' phenomenal resource and tool. Anyone? Nope. Okie doke, also got the BBC Microbit, so that's predominantly for our older learners, our second level learners. Microbit, well, no, actually, no, it's not. That's a complete lie. I absolutely take that back, because I have worked with first level learners and even some early level learners using the microbit, because you can do some really simple but incredibly effective things. You know, you can make your letters flash up, you can make your name flash up, you can make lots of different shape with some really very basic block-based coding. And again, it's replicated on the Scratch block-based environment as well. But everything on the microbit website is linked across our curriculum. We currently have a microbit project that we have been sharing across Scotland. We have, I think, over 100 primary teachers now engaged in that project. So again, I'll pop a wee link in there. I'm sure Pam shared it across the primary schools, but it's really to get as much support from our primary practitioners as possible to say, what do you guys need? What does that look like? And to engage in this research project, you also get popped into a prize draw, and I think it's £500 you could win for your school, and various other prizes as well. And it's only 2 meetings, 2 10-minute meetings that you need to have with microbit. So it's quite nice. It's quite a nice wee research project to get involved in. Again, BBC Bite Size. They've got lots of great resources looking at what is coding, and really, really nice little videos to explain that to your kids. I'm looking at the time. Code clubs across Scotland. Again, Code Club is the gift that keeps on giving. They're linked to Raspberry Pi. They have a wealth of resources. I've got a webinar coming up with them, which is based on the environment linked to COP26. So that's going to be happening soon. The Code Club resources are phenomenal. I would urge you to think about setting up a code club in your primary school, or supporting a local code club. Again, the resources are all there for you. You don't have to be this amazing computer scientist. The resources are there. There is so much support from Code Club in Scotland available to you. And again, they are willing to deliver. I'm sure Pam, Lorna would be willing to deliver a session for Renfrewshire on Code Club. And I actually think you've spoken to Lorna.
She's doing one in November. I was just checking the date.
Sorry.
Yeah.
And this is a really nice statement. This is Grace Hopper, you know, the first female computer programmer. And the most dangerous phrase in our language is, we've always done it this way. And, you know, this is the great thing about computing science, again, and a brilliant takeaway, that we never teach this in isolation. Let's really, you know, excite maths and numeracy. Let's bring that excitement back into literacy. Let's bring that excitement across our curriculum and embed computing science into that. I have a new 3-part computing science course. If you're interested in joining us, it's in collaboration with BCS, the Chartered Institute of IT, and myself and Dr. John Chips will be delivering this 3-part course. It will be at a much slower pace than this session has been. We'll be focusing on computational thinking for one entire session. We'll then move on to looking at coding along together and what that looks like. So we'll do a math code along together. And then in the 3rd session, looking at the pedagogy and looking at the research and actually putting that into action. So, so far I've got 76 teachers signed up to it, which is absolutely phenomenal. So have a look at DigiLearn Scott. I'll just take you to our new computing science blog, which is DigiLearn Computing Science. And in there, we have all the webinars I've spoken about. So you can sign up via DigiLearn Scott Computing Science, or just our normal DigiLearn Scott site. I've got a brilliant Apps for Good session that's going to be coming up, all about exploring the process of creating apps. And that's for 2nd level and upwards. Apps for Good is a really excellent organisation, and they have Apps for Good competitions every single year. And in fact, it's usually Scottish schools that win those competitions out of the entirety of the UK, which is just amazing, absolutely amazing. Also want to show you these areas within the computing science blog. So we've got learning paths for early learning childcare. What does that look like? What does computing science look like? And also I've created one for primary as well. And so you'll be able to look at what do we mean by computational thinking, analysing technology in the world around us, and the building and testing computing solutions. And it was also mentioned about what the digital learning may look like document. So I've popped that link earlier into the chat facility. So please, again, there's loads of places there for you to get started with. As I said, that was an absolute whirlwind tour of computing science and getting started, but I hope I've maybe won over some hearts and minds. I would really love it if you could, go forth and spread the great news that is computing science, because, we've just recently had a Scottish Tech ecosystem review of what computing science looks like across Scotland. They have declared an emergency on computing science across Scotland. I don't think there's really an emergency across nursery and primary, probably more so at secondary. But, we have to absolutely keep, applying these computing science skills with our learners. It's so phenomenally important. So that is me, Pam. Please, if anyone's got any questions, feel free to unmute yourself, ask any questions in the chat. Or what would be really nice for the last one whole minute is to share what you've been doing, perhaps.